Kyle, let's go to you here. Can you talk a little bit more about the Satoshi Needs You campaign? I think we've now kind of set the foreground for why the timing is now, but what exactly is it sort of aiming to achieve? And for folks listening, I mean, you're welcome to kind of direct people.
Yeah, well, we just launched the campaign last night officially at the Coin Center Gala in New York City. And so, it's now had exposure to, a good chunk of the, kind of policy and legal intelligentsia of, the Bitcoin ecosystem here on the East Coast. And we're going to be taking the campaign forward both to DC and rolling it out as well to all of the regional hubs that we can get our hands on around the country. Because again, the most important thing here is this is an actual grassroots organizing campaign to make sure that Bitcoiners get involved. Right. I've been, the genesis of this campaign, actually, I should say, to take a step back, was that, as I said, we started Save Our Wallets at the beginning of the year. Things looked like they were going well. We had the BRCA language incorporated in the Clarity Act. It passed the House, on a pretty healthy margin, and things were looking good. But then we made it to summer, and the DOJ prosecutions against Samurai and Tornado Cash happened. And all of a sudden, the mood got a lot darker, right? Because with no laws on the books, arguably we are now moving in reverse from, where we had been, prior to the Trump election or the Trump administration, coming in and saying that they wanted the United States to be, the global home of crypto. So basically, I just saw this disjoint that was happening where, your average Bitcoiner, people who are showing up to, the meetups, anybody that you would talk to in kind of your normal life, they thought we'd already won. Right? Didn't Trump get elected? Haven't we won? I thought we won. Aren't we having so much fun winning that we're tired of it? And of course the answer was absolutely not. Right now it's kind of just vibes. I'm grateful, and it's, great that we have as many supporters, willing to say things in Congress and in the administration as we have, but we need them to actually do things. And this is, what precipitated the idea of the campaign. So basically, I just kind of took a step back and was like, all right, well, how do we create a viral marketing campaign to get people engaged? Right. And feel a sense of solidarity with one another and the need to kind of unite as a community and participate in this political process that we have going on here, in the same way that the Bitcoin community came together in order to help decide the direction of the last election. And so, the kind of mimetic framework that I fell back on was, the traditional piece of Americana, which is Uncle Sam Needs You. That silhouette is almost instantly recognizable by anyone in America, and frankly, most people around the world. And so we centered the campaign around, that as a kind of viral image, and the homage to Dorian Nakamoto, who is the, not Satoshi character from the early days of, the movement.
It feels a little bit wrong to use the term mascot, but it's something in that.
Yeah, it's adjacent. I don't know exactly what we would call Dorian, but for anybody who's been involved in the ecosystem for, a cycle or two, you're probably familiar with Dorian. And so we kind of merged these two mimetically sticky and, emotionally evocative images together in order to create this. And this has been a wonderful collaboration between all the different pieces of the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I initially reached out to the Bitcoin Design Foundation and was able to find an exceptional visual designer through the Bitcoin Design Foundation. And then once we got to the point of having seen where it was heading and getting really excited, reached out to BPI and Coin Center as the kind of two leading policy organizations for, the Bitcoin ecosystem. And, now we're starting to, build the big tent, right? So we've got Presidio Bitcoin, PubKey, Bitcoin Park, all of these different physical hubs around the country are starting to come together in order to make sure that Bitcoiners in the real world and out in meat space are actually, encountering this image. It's starting conversations. It's getting people engaged. Again, with the idea that, we just need Bitcoiners to pick up the phone or write a letter and make their voices heard on this issue. Again, we decided the last election by, if you look at the numbers, I think it's pretty clear. We were a substantial swing vote in determining the direction that, the current Congress and the administration are headed. And, we just need to make sure that they continue to live up to the commitments that they made to this ecosystem, and that they're being true to the values that they said that they espoused in wanting to, make the United States the global home and leader of the crypto industry. And in order to do that, we need a healthy and vibrant and flourishing Bitcoin industry in the United States, and we need that entrepreneurialism. I come from Silicon Valley. If Congress had stepped all over their own feet in trying to regulate the internet in the early days, if they had required that you get a license in order to start a website, or to create an application that was going to be provided to average users and on the street using the internet, we would not have the Mag 7. We would not have trillions of dollars of economic wealth. I mean, probably millions of jobs, all of these things that we now take for granted in the United States. So again, the idea here is like, this is pretty simple for Bitcoiners. You know what you need to do. This is, just get off the couch, or what, even if you're sitting on the couch, dial the phone. You just got to dial the phone and you can stay on the couch. But we need everybody in this fight. The freedom to transact is critical. It's a critical right that we frankly have kind of taken for granted for the last 15 years while we haven't had legal guidelines around this industry. And now is the moment. Now is the moment for us to drive into the red zone and put this ball, over the net or in the net or through the post, whatever metaphor we want to use here on the sport. But, we're this close to victory, and your congressperson needs to know that there's going to be a consequence if they don't help us achieve that victory.
Zach, the thing we hear a lot is, my politicians don't listen to me. They don't care about me. What do you have to say to that, as this campaign is basically, an effort to make sure that policymakers hear the voice of Bitcoiners?
Well, they probably don't care about you personally, unless you're, a relatively significant donor. I mean, unfortunately, that's the case. Maybe you meet them, maybe you're compelling, but the bar is not that they care about you personally. I think as a tactical matter, the first thing I want to highlight from what Kyle said is calling. I think the call to action here is specifically a phone call and not an email. Emails are easy to ignore. They're easy to generate with AI. And it's not the politicians themselves, but their staff, and we're talking about senators here, right? We're trying to get a bill passed through the Senate. Senators' staff do take notice of how many phone calls they get. And you shouldn't be an asshole on the phone. That can undermine the cause. But as long as, and you don't even need to be particularly articulate, we can do that for you. You just need to call and say, hey, this is important to me, and here's why, in whatever way works. And maybe you're persuasive to the staffer, but even if you're not, like, they are going to note how many people call about this issue, and they're going to use that as a proxy for what people in aggregate care about. And senators very much do care, not necessarily about you, but they care about what people care about in aggregate, as we saw in the previous election. So that's really what's going on here. And so part of it is just the sort of naked politics of demonstrating to your senator that people in your state who vote for them and who their party would like to vote for their chosen presidential candidate in 2028 care about this issue, and that they don't want to be crosswise. The thing about Bitcoin and crypto that people have been saying since 2024 is really sort of a cell phone for the Democrats to do so poorly on this in the previous administration, because there's not really a great grassroots constituency for being anti-crypto, and there is a large constituency for whom they're basically single issue voters. And so reinforcing that point, I think, is really quite powerful. And if you're willing to take the time to call, you're putting yourself in a small minority of people that really get to have an outsized impact, because your voice will implicitly stand for thousands of people. Given how like the base rate of people who call into senator's office is so small, like your vote, your call is sort of the equivalent of many votes. And so it does matter in that regard. And then the other thing here is, like, most of the people voting against it, right? Like, Elizabeth Warren understands the custodial, non-custodial distinction quite well. And because she is anti-Bitcoin and anti-crypto, she is going to go against it. She is in the small minority of people who are going to vote against this legislation or try and kill the developer protections. Most of them are not going to understand it, and they're going to do it because they don't understand it and they want to do a favor for someone else. They heard something from someone that it's bad, right? Some sort of vague reason where they do not have a lot of personal conviction on the issue. And if you happen to be in one of the states that has those senators, it's extra important that they know this is an issue you care about to motivate them looking into it, right? Right. So they end up looking at the stuff that Coin Center puts out and BPI puts out, and asking their staffers to read up on this. The sort of biggest challenge here is going to be education. And so aside from giving senators the idea that this is something their constituency cares about, which matters even if they don't care about you in particular, you are also helping motivate the education that is a necessary prerequisite for getting this across the line.
One other thing I might add there is that, it can feel kind of scary if you've never contacted your congressperson before to like pick up the phone. It's like, hey, I'm calling the government, like to tell them to do something for me. Like, I don't know, and a lot of people, in the technology industry, let's say, or maybe not extroverts. But I want to reassure everybody that this is actually a very welcome thing from the perspective of, the legislators. I was at the Day on the Hill organizing event that, BPI organized a few months ago. And it was my first time sitting down with, Congress. I've done it in my local market out in California in the State House before, but I had the same apprehension. I was like, oh my gosh, the hot lights, like this is going to be hard. And it actually wasn't at all. They were very open to the conversation. And in fact, they were, I think, very happy to have somebody that actually knew something about the technology sitting across the table from them. Frankly, I might have been the first shadowy supercoder that, any of these people in the offices that I'd talked to had ever spoken with. They clearly just didn't have a really, good understanding of the industry or the market and technology generally. So I think it's both critical that they hear from people who understand the technology and understand its importance, because if they're not hearing from you, all they're hearing is FUD from the people who are, anti and like literally willing to paint with a completely inaccurate brush. And, lastly, I think I would just, plus 10 on Zack's point that, most people do not contact their Congress people with any regularity at all. If everybody listening to this podcast or the stream were to pick up the phone and call, it would probably be the most highly engaged issue on the Hill today.